Yo, what's up guys? You got pokeaim here with just a video on some tips to doing better in Smogon Tournaments. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you already know how to enter Smogon Tournaments and you're just not doing as well as you would like to. I'm not gonna lie guys, this video isn't some magic video that you're gonna watch and oh my god, I'm gonna get first place in OST or in Smogon Tours on the weekends. No, it's not anything like that, but it is just some basic tips that can help you do better. Of course, it depends on how much work you're willing to put in, how much you practice. So again, if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you already know how to enter tournaments, but if you don't, smogon.com/forums, you click tournaments tab right here, and then you basically just wait for something. Let's say it says signups or something like that. This is round one, so we obviously can't join that, but let's say there's something that says signups. You would literally just click right here. This thing has its tournament signups, right? And you just type in and press post reply. I don't want to join this tournament, so I'm not doing it. But yeah, so let's assume that you are in, and I'm just gonna give a lot of examples of what you can do and things to do better. But let's assume that you're in the official Smogon tournament. Your round one opponent didn't show up, so now you're in round two. But let's say you're playing someone who is known, okay? And by that I mean like someone who's actually made a name, that you recognize their name. And I think those are the easiest players for you to play because you can recognize what they use. So we'll find somebody right here. You know what? We're just gonna do me. We're just gonna find me, okay? So aim. My name is aim on here. So look at me. So let's say you're playing me, and your name is Freestyler King. He's actually a friend of mine. So right. So one of the things you can do is, obviously I have a channel, so it's not that hard to look up what I like to use. You can literally watch any video. Go ahead and click a like too. But for me, the alt that I like to play on is pokeaim. So one thing that you can obviously do is search up about your opponent, what they like to use. If you actually searched hard enough, you'd easily be able to find my OST replays, because I'm not really one that's big on hiding my replays, whereas some people do. But let's say you're playing me in, it's Gen 7 OU, it's OST. So you'd look for some Gen 7 OU teams or Gen 7 OU games right here. Here's some games versus Fully Cully, a friend of mine. As you can see right here, I use Tangrowth, okay? So that's one game I use Tangrowth. This game I use Tangrowth too. I use the exact same team, Tangrowth Landers. And in game 3, I also use Tangrowth Landers. So something that you can assume from this, and it's not always going to work. I mean, I'll change up my style depending. But something you can assume is, okay, my opponent loves to use Tangrowth Landers. Tangrowth and Landers is something I should be prepared for. Maybe Toxapex. If you guys didn't know, Tangrowth, Landers, Toxapex is a really, really common core right now because they all take on what the other is weak to and just help check some of the busted mons in the tier right now, like Zygarde or Greninja, things like that. So that's one thing that you could do. You look up replays, be familiar with what your opponent is using. That's something you could do. Now this isn't going to work for everybody, because a lot of people who are, I want to say smarter, for example, they'll hide their replays. Again, I don't really care so much for hiding my replays, just because I upload to YouTube every day, so there's no point in hiding my replays. If one I want to use, I'll just change up my team. But for example, if you're playing in round 6 of OST, and it's no JMP versus, or NJMP versus Rich Homie Chris, my boy Moet. Something I could do is look up, I know Moet's alt, Lord Moet, so I looked that up, but maybe I can't find any of the games even though I know they play. That's just what happens when you hide the rooms, but you could just find some, some Gen 7 OU replays. So that's something you can do. Just be familiar with stuff that your opponent likes to use. I can tell you right now, NJMP, and I've been following his run. I also watched his SPL game, and you don't always have to look in the replay thread, because especially if your opponent is known like that, if you go in the tournament section and you know that they're playing an SPL, go to logs and replays. I type in NJMP and I'll find a couple Sun and Moon OU games right here. Sun and Moon OU, Sun and Moon OU. So that's one thing you can do. This is ORS. That's one thing you can do. And by using that, you can come up with something like this. I'm not saying do this. This is something that my manager did for people that we were playing, but they would put together the teams that they would use, just so I could be familiar with what they like to use. It's not that this is saying, okay, well, my opponent's going to bring Hoopa in this game and Mantine in this game. No, but it's just allowing you to be familiar with what they use. That way you don't lose to it. So if I saw my opponent bring this Azel team, I'm not thinking, what the hell are these Pokemon doing? No, because I've seen these replays, I've seen them use this. So that's something you could do, familiarize yourself with your opponent. Another big thing, obviously, and this is common sense, practice. Practice with your team. Practice with what you want to use. If you're... I'll show you... okay, let's say it's this crappy team that was just randomized for me. If I'm using this team, let's make sure that I can match up well versus stall. Let's make sure I can match up well versus offense, especially after I've seen, oh wow, my opponent used offense all 6 rounds of this tournament. Maybe I should be prepared for that. So that's something you want to do. Practice with your team. That's common sense, but a lot of people don't like to do that, which is completely fine. Another thing that you have to know is, if you practice with a team, if you're really comfortable with it, it allows you to play well no matter what matchup. This team, for example, that I'm using, well, not no matter what matchup, but as long as you play well, of course. But if you're familiar with how to play versus certain threats, even if you have a bad matchup, you can come on out of it, or on top rather. So this is a game that I played for SPL, Week 1 versus Poic. Very, very, very solid ORS-OU player. He was actually ranked number 1 in ORS-OU. And the team I'm using, you might recognize it. It's the Jam Special that I like to call it. The team that Jam used all of ORS-OU. Or not all of ORS-OU, but like towards the last few months of ORS-OU with Cofagrigus, Starmie, Diancie, Talonflame, Hippo, Ferrothorn. Now, I really, really love this team. I've been using it for about, I want to say, close to a year, or however long it's been out. I've been using it since then. And even though I used it every single round of OST last year as well, it kept doing well for me because I just knew how to use it. I practiced. I've been using it so long that it didn't matter. Like, for example, in this game, Poic had Specs Hydreigon and Pokemon like Metagross, which are definitely huge threats to this team, but I was able to play in a certain way because I had practiced with the team so much to put myself in a position to win. Unfortunately, I didn't end up winning because I ended up missing Will-O-Wisp on Garchomp, which meant that I win with Cofag. But the thing is about Pokemon, like as long as you... Okay, I feel like the worst thing to do, or the worst thing in a tournament, is when you lose, but not because you got hacks, but because you could have played better, because you misplayed. That's like the worst feeling for me. If I played terribly in a tournament and I lost because of it, I hate that because I'm a competitive player, right? So sometimes, of course, things are out of your control. You can limit odds. Like, I put myself in a position to win 85% of the time because Lewis's accuracy is 85, and I ended up missing it, and the game went downhill from there. But this is the end game that I played it to. But you want to practice with your team because you don't want to make misplays when you're playing versus something like that. I mean, like, nobody's perfect. Nobody's the perfect player. Definitely think through your think through your plays, of course. But I think practice is really, 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 really underlooked. I know some people, and I do the same thing from time to time. I can just get a team from a friend, and I'll play it well. I do that all the time in Showdown Lives, but this is different when it's in the tournament scene. If I don't know how to play versus stall, I'll be down a game. And though in this tournament it is best of 3, so it does give you a room to adapt. But definitely practice with your team. I'm not saying counter team your opponent, no, but be familiar with what your opponent likes to use. NJMP, his favorite team is that Sticky Web team with Smeargle, Mimikyu, Celesteela, which runs Fire, Water, Grass, Fire, Flying Grass, Fire Blast, Air Slash, Giga Drain, Autotomize, Mega Pinsir, SD Bisharp, like, and Life Orb Mimikyu, like those things. Like I said Mimikyu twice, but that's something that I would be familiar with if I had to play them. Though obviously I would change up my style. So like, I'm not saying that bring a Sticky Web counter team, but just have some measures for that. That's something he likes to use. So I'm not using NJMP as an example because we're both in the next round of OST, and I'm telling him, oh yeah, man, I'm bringing Sticky Web. No, it doesn't matter. Like I showed in the Poic replay, it doesn't matter if you know what's coming if you know how to play versus certain matchups. I wouldn't be surprised if he brought Sticky Web versus me anyway. But that's just something you want to do. You want to familiarize yourself with an opponent. Definitely, also, I think calm down a bit. It is a tournament game, but you got to remember that Pokemon is a game that we play for fun. You're playing this game because you enjoy it, not because you have to. And if you're playing it because you have to, I don't know what you're doing. Like, make sure you enjoy this game that you're playing. But yeah, like, sometimes things are out of your control that you can't handle. You know, just take a breather. That's fine. Hacks does happen, but A big thing is familiarize yourself with your opponent. Even if you can't find replays, that's fine. Even if you find old replays, just see what they like to use. I'm not saying stalk your opponent, no, but if my opponent has a specific style that they really... Oh, Cybertron's online, that's cool. If my opponent has a specific style that they really love using, then just know at least that team. And I'm not saying that knowing that team will help you beat it. No, because your opponent can change up anything. I'll show you an example of UUPL, pokeaimMD. There it is. This was the UUPL finals that... Shut up, Blender. This is the UUPL finals that I played versus Blender, right? And I brought an RMT. I brought a known RMT versus Blender, but I changed up all the sets because Blender was on Unfuga's team, so I know Unfuga. I know he has certain habits that he loves on certain mons that he loves. So like I changed Azel to HP Ice because I know Unfuga loved Gligar. I made Slurpuff Aromatherapy because I knew that Unfuga's way of beating it would be, you know, Porygon with Thunder Wave. So that's just something I ended up doing. I actually ended up losing this game because I got full parried on the Aromatherapy when he went hard Hydreigon. But the game was pretty much won at that point. So that's also something, like, just because you know that your opponent, or just because you know your opponent's team, don't fall into this false sense of security that you can beat them just because you know exactly what you know the team, or you recognize the team, because you don't want them to have changed up something that like catches you off guard. So like if I see a Landorus, for example, and my opponent used defensive Landorus 6 out of 6 games, and then I lose the game because my opponent's Landorus was Dual Dance, that's my fault, because I know that he likes defensive Landorus, but I should still play in a sense that until I find out the exact set, I should still play around it in a sense that, okay, it could be defensive Landorus, but this definitely could be Dual Dance Landorus. So just have those things in mind. That's definitely something you could do. Practice, as I said, that's so important. When you're building your team, don't necessarily counter team, but just have some measures to know that if my opponent loves to use stall, let me have at least a stall breaker too. I mean, I think a good team should have that anyway. But if my opponent loves Protean Greninja, you might as well click X because that mon is broken, you know. But that's just something. This is a black and white OU randomized team. It's so bad. But yeah, it's just something you could do. And again, practice. I love building with my friends. That's just something I love to do because I find myself a better builder when I have somebody to bounce off ideas. So let's say I saw that my opponent brought Landorus, Toxapex, no, 3 games and then Tangrowth. I'd be like, okay, let me be prepared for this. I'll talk with my friends like, oh, what do you think beats this core? And then we'll bounce back some ideas, and he'll be like, oh man, Kyurem Black is really good versus that. Oh man, Pokemon like this and this mon can definitely beat that. So it's good to build with your friends, especially if you have trusted friends. Another thing, don't get ghosted, man. Don't ghost in tournaments. These are tournaments that they don't necessarily matter, but Smogon has rules. So. And by ghosting, I mean don't be in a call with your friends, and basically don't do what we do in our collabs. If you're in a tournament, like an official tournament, where it's you playing. If it's a team tournament, fine. Our team tournament is in that it allows you to legally be in call with your opponents, or with your friends. But like if it's a tournament like this, don't be in call, man, while you're playing. You will somehow get caught. They always do. Whether it's out of jealousy of the person who ended up winning, even though they were ghosted, bragging, and people were like, "Oh man, we have these screenshots." Like, hey, don't do that. But yeah, basically, it's not gonna work all the time. You're not always gonna be able to find replays, but I mean, if you search hard enough, you definitely can. Even if it's old replays, even if it's because you don't have to know exactly what they're bringing every single round, but if you're just familiar with what they like to use, I think you could do a lot better. This video was improv. Like I didn't have anything down. I just want to talk. Really about like some ways that you could do better, and also I think that familiarizing yourself with common teams in the metagame as well. So let's say I'm in an OU tournament, I can go to Sun and Moon OU, and let's go to the sample teams that, right? So we got NJMP posting right here. Like these teams, for example, like know what these teams are. You don't have to necessarily stalk this thread 24/7, but if you see a team that you're familiar with, like you can definitely, it's easier to play if you know what your opponent's using, right? So, for example, this is a Sticky Web team that he uses all the time, and NJMP is, I keep saying no JMP because that's That's an old YouTuber. But NJMP loves this team. He absolutely loves this team, and he has used it so many times in OST. And even if people know what's coming, like if you don't have good countermeasures to it, like he knows how to play around certain threats. It's the same thing with my poet game. Like it doesn't matter if you know the squad. Sometimes people can just outplay it, but like you have like the OB team here, you have his standard sticky web, cancer stall, cancer's SPL stall. But like be familiar with what's common in the metagame as well. That'll help you. But that's just pretty much the biggest tip I've been saying for 15 minutes. Be familiar with what your opponent can use, know what they like to use, practice with your team. I think that's so important to know how to play through certain matchups, especially if you're in a team tournament like SPL. Like make sure you don't lose to stall. If you're using a specific team and you know that your opponent likes to use stall. So but yeah, and like I said, mentioned earlier, have fun, man. It's Pokemon. You gotta enjoy the game you play. Like you don't have to conceal all your replays so people can't watch. You just enjoy, have fun, love the game you play, man. Even if it's sometimes you get hacked style, you're like, oh my god, I hate this game. But you know, that's the game you choose to play. You can minimize odds by making certain plays. You can play safer to make it, give yourself a better odds at playing. Like if, for example, you lose a game right there if your opponent crits you, and then your opponent crits you, if you had outs, like let's say I had Landers out, my opponent had Bandit Garchomp out, right? But it's at -1 and my Landers is at 60%. Okay, I can live this hit because I'm Landers, but if my opponent crits me right here, I lose. And then I had Clefable in the back anyway and they're locked into Outrage, like, and then your opponent crits you, that's your fault. You didn't have to go Landers. You could have went Clefable right there and taken advantage of the fact that they were locked into that. Maybe Landers gave you some more momentum, but Clefable was a safer play to play out versus that you already knew they were locked into Outrage. But that's just some things, like you could play a certain way to sometimes minimize hacks. But that's just some stuff you could do. Anyway, I've been talking long enough. That's my boy Etika, by the way. I hope you guys learned something, even if I was just rambling, which I tend to do all the time. But I hope you did learn at least something. Just be familiar with your team, practice with it. And yeah, that's basically it. So I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye, friends.